Ma'am, over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Jaiswal, for your kind introduction. Introduction of your institution itself and the introduction of the participants and the presenters. Good afternoon and namaste. Thank you, NISC, for inviting me and making me the part of this program. And so far, I think this is, although this is a very small and a specific gathering, it's going to be very meaningful and productive. The presentation on between agency and the shelter, the strategy of Nepal in dynamically evolving security landscape. That is going to be very message oriented and informative for Nepal and for South Asia and East Asia as a whole. So the topic is very timely and this is very important and significant. At a time when we have seen very unprecedented changes in global power structures, and we have seen rise of many new actors, and we have seen even the power shift from west to east, and now the regionalism is coming up as a major agendas of global politics. And at the same time, South Asia is coming up as epicenter of 21st century, and we see many rising security threats coming up, and at the same time, we see power rivalry in the region that has, I think, of course, intensified the changing geopolitical landscapes in South Asia. And we have seen so many formations of pacts, security dialogues, and alliances in the region. And again, this presentation is expected to be very timely, especially for Nepal at a time when we are coming up with many strategic in a dynamically evolving security landscapes. When Nepal is at the critical juncture, Nepal is at the critical juncture with a remarkable transformations in her foreign policy coming up from her geostrategic locations. And this is the situation as well through which she has to come up from mere survival, but go ahead with all the pro-cons, merits and demerits of geographic locations in the changing geopolitical realities. So, and this is again timely to be very serious. Nepal has to be at a time when Nepal has to be very serious with external environment regarding her security dynamics, while she holds a very significant geostrategic importance in regional and global politics. So I see the session is going to be very lively and is being attended by various experts from various backgrounds. I'm sure that the discussions and outcomes will be very benefited to all the policymakers, the researchers, and the academia. Now, we'll be hearing more from Agnieszka, and I'll be letting you know some more about her. Agnieszka Kudzewska-Bonhart, PhD, she is a political scientist and associate professor at the Institute of Middle and Far East. She belongs to the Faculty of International and Political Studies, Jagiellonian University in Kharkov. She did her PhD on persistent conflicts, escalation and de-escalation dynamics, and habilitation on socio-political and security-related challenges in Pakistan. Her research and teaching focus on international relations, conflict and security studies, human rights in conflicts, political security-related, economic and social challenges of Asia and the Pacific. She has conducted many research trips to Asia, including India, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan. She is a member of the International Studies Association, ISA, the European Association for South Asian Studies, the Polish Association of International Relations, and a graduate of the United Nations Human Rights Council Training Program, UNITAR, Geneva. She is a co-author of 6 books already and many research articles. She is a visiting professor scholar at many European and Asian universities, University of the Punjab in Lahore, University of Peshawar, Pakistan, Jawaharlal Nehru University, University of Calcutta, India, and Rostock University, Germany, University of Tartu, Estonia, Baltic Academy, Riga, Latvia. She delivered guest lectures at the Tashkent State of University of Economics in Uzbekistan, Quaid-e-Azam University in Islamabad, Christian Foreman College in Lahore, University of Latvia, Riga, and others. So she has plenty of experiences, and she will be sharing all those knowledge with us, among us. And now the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Professor. And thank you, Dr. Jaswal, for inviting me here. It's a great pleasure being here. And I will not share my knowledge only, I want also to exchange the knowledge, because this is why I'm here basically. You can't teach about South Asia without regular visits to the region. And that made me unhappy during the pandemic that I could not come to South Asia. Last time it was in 2019 when I visited India. So I'm extremely happy. This is my first trip to Asia after during the pandemic, but almost after, hopefully, the pandemic. So the more happy I am that I'm here. I will be sharing my thoughts on, let me stand because could you press the F5? If F5,
this
then...
is PPT. This is PDF, so...
This is PDF. Yeah. Okay. So I'm not sure if it's visible there. So I will try to refer to it. So my name is Agnieszka Puszewska-Bonet, and I'm from Jagiellonian University in Kraków. I'm from Poland. Jagiellonian University is the oldest university in Poland. From 13th century, we have traditions of learning and teaching. And I'm from the Faculty of International Relations and in Political Studies. And I represent the chair of South Asia, focusing on research in South Asia. As a political scientist, I think this is a tremendously interesting region, strategically, historically, culturally, economically, you name it. And I was focusing on powers, right? Pakistan, India, China, United States, all power politics, interactions, rivalries. And then there was a moment when I learned that Lithuania, a tiny country in Europe, it's like 2 million people only, withdrew from Chinese project 17+1. Although most countries in Eastern, Central Europe are in this project. And they were somehow brave enough to say no and develop relations with Japan and other countries, like within this let's say, in the so-called Indo-Pacific strategy, which I refer to like, this is like geostrategic idea, a bit of artificial, but American-led strategy. In 10 years, maybe they will come up with something new. But now we are talking about Indo-Pacific. Everybody is talking about Indo-Pacific. So Lithuania decided to just withdraw and to introduce their own independent policy, which is tremendously challenging for such a small country. And then I got interested in the topic and started doing research on some smaller countries, or the countries that are perceived as smaller. Of course, there is no comparison between Lithuania with 2 million people and Nepal with around 30 million people. But when you look at the entire region and you see this huge India, like I think now it's more people in India than in China already, even this month I think. And then you think, okay, Nepal is a small state, but there is also like smaller state, but there is also this perception in Europe, people don't know much. They think that this is just a tiny country, maybe like Bhutan or something, and my students don't know. So basically they're studying international relations, and still when I asked them about Nepal, they thought, and asked how many people live in Nepal. I had this question to students, like friends, and they say, oh, maybe 5 million, maybe 6, not so many. But of course the reality is quite different. So I wanted to do more research and to know the perspective of smaller states and develop this theory of shelter, a little bit of shelter, because when you live in such a neighborhood, then you need cooperation. Obviously, when you're a landlocked country, you need multi-dimensional cooperation with your neighbors. And when you share historically inherited affinities and everything else with India, then you also need to cooperate. So shelter, but again, another pillar of this theory is agency, right? So the research on smaller states is focused on how they can contribute to reshaping, changing the strategic environment. And I do think, and I'm a proponent of this idea, that we should not only focus on these superpowers and rivalries, but we should also look at international relations from the perspective of smaller countries, but the countries which due to their capabilities or vulnerabilities, which can be turned into strengths, they can be regarded as small powers. If you could change, please. So then my presentation will be divided into like 5 elements, the initial assumptions, then I will refer to some theory of small states or small powers, then regional security landscape and its impact on Nepal. There's a plethora of challenges there, agency and shelter in Nepal strategy, and some concluding remarks that I think that like these 5 pillars are important elements of transforming vulnerabilities into strengths, and what conditions should be met to introduce these changes. You can continue, please. So then we know that Nepal is strategically located in a very challenging region. And as I come from the country which has also experienced the rivalry, like Poland is located between Russia and Germany, and we also have these historically inherited fears, problems. Now Russia's war in Ukraine, and which has direct impact on Poland. So this sense of a feeling, or the fact that we understand somehow how it is to live or to be located in geostrategically challenging situation, I think it also somehow enables me to understand or try to understand the realities of Nepal and look at it from the perspective of people living here, and how it somehow impacts the way Nepal developed. Poland has also experienced a huge change, the transformation from the economy which was based on central planning under Soviet occupation after '89, and then slow transformation into a democratic country. So these realities are to some extent similar here. And when I was researching and reading lots of books about the current history of Nepal, I must admit that I'm extremely impressed how this country has developed since like 1951. From this Rana oligarchic rule towards like slow development of democracy, with challenges of course, with different problems, setbacks, but nonetheless it has managed to introduce a secular, democratic country and constitution. I mean, in this region it's particularly challenging. Look at India, look at the development in India, like under Modi regime, when there is this growing nationalism, when religion is used as a political tool to polarize society and to divide people, right? And here I see resilience, that I see this coexistence, and hopefully, and this is one of, I think, because we understand security in a multidimensional way, like it's economic, political, security related. So I do think that this is one of potential security risks for Nepal, that this Hindu nationalist approach may have a spillover effect here, and that would not be a good scenario for such a country as Nepal. I think this is one of the threats, possible or potential threats for the future, that Nepal's resilience lies in this approach to keep religious balance, coexistence, and to look or to project itself as a country which manages to introduce these kinds of policies in such a difficult neighborhood. Overcoming geographical structural weaknesses, this is a challenge. This has been a challenge for Nepal always, I think. And how to build, to consolidate, to improve its position and capabilities, because there is no doubt that Nepal has capabilities. It's just a way how they should be used and how, I would say, mature leadership should introduce certain changes, right? Because this is here. I mean, this small power or power lies here in Nepal, not only in the neighborhood. Of course, neighborhood is important, and developing relations with neighborhood, with farther neighborhood as well. But this, and it's everywhere in Poland and whatever country, give power to the people who are experienced, smart, and knowledgeable, and that they can introduce certain policies, certain changes. And I also assume that in this dynamically changing security landscape, but we are repeating this, but I think that the security landscape has always been changing. But we are living in these times, and we say it is dynamically changing again and again and again. But what is different now is the fact that we, as researchers, I'm talking from the researcher's perspective, we tend to look more at smaller states. And I think, and other researchers as well, this is not my idea, that supporting multilateralism, rules-based order, acting as advocates for peace and connectivity, this is where the power of smaller state lies in. And this is the important element, like a pillar of their policies. And I think that smaller states somehow have no other option but to support peaceful relations, because any conflict escalation, the massive escalation of rivalry, may pose a direct threat to every single smaller state, which does not have huge army, which is not a nuclear power, and which has to focus on cooperation, on connectivity. So I also assume that, looking at history of Nepal, we can say that this country has historically inherited geostrategic resilience, which is a very powerful tool for shaping the policy, changing the strategies, and introducing certain reforms as well. And it has the potential to strengthen its position of a small power, provided that this policy of smart balancing, introducing certain political changes or reforms, is successfully materialized. And you can go further. So there is lots of theoretical analysis on small states. I've read a lot of theory, a lot of books, like Peter Katzenstein. In the 80s, in the 20th century, basically, it was more focused on the fact that smaller states have to adjust. They have to act accordingly and listen to what bigger states say and how they manage their policy. So the flexible adjustment theory was rather focused on this perception of smaller states as passive actors. And then it slowly started changing, and I liked more the theory that focuses on active approach, on this agency approach for smaller states, like Robert Kiyana. He used the term small power. I think for the first time, with reference to the states, we have to admit they don't have enough resources to decisively shape the international order, but they are capable of influencing the system through different tactics, different policies, like multilateral cooperation, increased activity in international organization, participation in the establishment of international institutions. So somehow they can efficiently go, although it's a difficult process, very challenging, they can go beyond their inherent vulnerabilities and influence the system. Baldur Thorvaldsson, this is the guy, the researcher from Iceland, also a small country. He discussed security policy based on compensating structural weaknesses of small states by engaging in the system of multi-level protection from power states on the one hand, but he has the shelter theory that is a very interesting and important contribution to the analysis. And in the 21st century, it has changed. There is a significant and interesting and important change of perception by Western researchers and let's say Eastern from the region. So then we have the resilience, nurturing, numerous opportunities. We have social constructivism, the IR theory that focuses on norms, identities, ideas. That is also important in this expanding the opportunities for smaller states. And I think this is an interesting part of the research, like focusing on constructivist ideas. And then in 2020, articles show that small states' behavior is becoming more diverse and more dynamic than ever. And that's why I'm here, basically, to research and to focus on the policy of Nepal. So then there is a plethora of challenges when we see this regional landscape and its impact. So everything has direct or indirect impact on Nepal. And while constructing security strategy, everything has to be taken into consideration, which means Nepal needs very well-educated experts who have expertise on Afghanistan, on the entire South Asia, on China, on India, on Europe, on America. So then we have the enduring rivalry, and this is, you know better than me, how enduring rivalry in South Asia unfortunately has this adverse impact on the chances for cooperation, for integration. Like we have this European Union, where Europe has integrated, we have no borders, we can travel freely. And when I talk to people in South Asia, they say this would also be like a dream, just to travel freely without any problems, without any conflicts, like from Nepal to India to Pakistan to Afghanistan. This dream will not materialize, I'm afraid, during our lives, unfortunately, due to this belligerency and this post-colonial mindset, which is in India and Pakistan, because I think this conflict comes from post-colonial approach. Pakistani army behaves like colonial power in Pakistan, right? Indian army has more and more political power and somehow tries to influence the political discourse in the country. And both countries are using, as I already said, religion as a divisive tool. This two-nation theory which enabled Pakistan to be created, which was a false theory. Look at Bengal, look at Bangladesh. So it proved, right, that this theory, it's not enough to take religion and create a state. When people are so diverse, they come from different regions. The migrants came from India to Karachi, and they were regarded as strangers there. So that was like an artificially created, for different reasons, for some personal ideas, like of certain politicians who wanted to be powerful, like Jinnah, for example, and to have a buffer state. The West wanted a buffer state in northern India, right? That was also important, unfortunately. So what we are experiencing here, unfortunately, and I'm happy I'm not from Britain, I'm from Eastern Europe, we never colonized anyone, but unfortunately the region is still suffering from a colonial period, and that's why there is this conflict, which has direct impact on Nepal. The tinderbox relation, so many researchers are using different expressions to somehow describe this conflict. Enduring rivalry.
I can interrupt.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Like, let me introduce myself first. I came late. I'm Dr. Kriti Gunsu, and I graduated from China. I studied in Bangladesh. So when you talk about Bangladesh, I studied there from 2008 to 10 at Dhaka University. It was a regional master's program funded by Norway, NORAD, Oslo.
Yeah.
So we had Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Norway.
Wow.
And then you have University of Punjab. We have professors from Nepal, College of Journalism and Mass Communication. So what happened when Pakistani lecturers came into our class? Bangladeshi, they denied to take the class back in 2008. So they said, you have to say sorry to us. First say sorry to us, then only we'll take the class. It was a big issue in the classroom of 30 students, where we all were there. It was a regional masters. You can feel that,
I can
right?
understand.
So when we were talking, I just wanted to share this example.
Yeah.
And then they said sorry to the Pakistani professors. They said sorry to Bangladeshi students. Then we had the class for 2 years. And then when he returned back, when we graduated, he was wearing a Bangladeshi dress, and he said, I'm half Bangladeshi now.
Yeah.
So that
But
was
this is
really-
very
this is just an
important.
example
And the
that I
connectivity
shared.
among young people is
Exactly.
very important. Like
So
we had
where-
with Germany. Germany has apologized billion times.
So
Poland.
where are we?
And I was
Yeah.
studying in Germany, and in like the beginning of the 21st century, and we had these discussions with students. How should we be blamed for what our grandfathers did on the one hand? But at the same time, if the government does not apologize, like it was in the case of Bangladesh, and there was a genocide there.
Genocide was in Rwanda, I think. Bangladesh had, when we were there, it has this BDS
Yeah.
even in the army, like our hostel was near to the army room, and we were evacuated from a small hole, you know.
Yeah.
So I think it's not the genocide, I think that army massacre.
No, during this partition
Yeah,
time.
Before that was
the
long back.
partition.
71.
But there was this journalist from Punjab
Yeah.
who went
True.
to Bengal, and then he left, he escaped
Yeah.
to London, and he published this article,
Is
I
it
don't
Quran,
know,
yeah?
and it was titled Genocide, and it opened the eyes in the West,
Exactly.
what is happening, what is going on there.
True.
I'm also referring to this article in my books. Because it was like ethnic cleansing also, targeted killings of civilians, right? So it's about the definition, how you define genocide, from whose perspective.
Yeah.
you're talking.
So like my little concern is when it comes to security, like you have been talking about that, and my PhD was on ICT and socio-economic development at Nepal. I graduated 2 years back, and I'm in the policy making level. I'm in the advertisement board making digital TTL policy now. It's been just 1 month. So when we talk about regional security and landscape, you know, like COVID has made a globe into a single thing, right? We have this Facebook security,
Yeah.
or this, let's say social media security, and then online media security. So how do you relate it, you know, when it comes to regional security?
Sorry to
landscape
disturb
and its
you.
impact on
We'll
the
have
power?
this discussion
Yeah.
part
Yeah.
at the end of the
Yeah,
presentation.
I think
Is that okay?
the key
Yes?
is education.
Okay.
And if you give the students the textbooks where history is distorted and everything is presented from your perspective, like Pakistani textbooks, India attacked us 65, India always. And I was talking to a PhD student from Pakistan who was in Europe, and she said, "Is it India? India is like," and I said, "You're doing a PhD. You have all books available in Pakistan. When you go to a bookstore, it's like here, all Oxford, everything you can read, but they say it's Western propaganda." I mean, West has their own strategies, policies. Americans have done a lot of bad things in Afghanistan, which will backfire here. I'm absolutely sure that this is just like, and they now they switch to this Indo-Pacific, right? They left Afghanistan in this terrible, you know, it was just, I helped my Afghani friend escaping, and when the Taliban came over, and that was just so, such a tragedy for all these people. So I know that Western, Americans have their own strategies, their own business, and they ruin a lot in the region, right? But at the same time, we should also look at, because if we look at these policies of India, Pakistan, for example, constantly from the perspective that they are somehow inherited from the time of colonial era, then we somehow deprive their leadership of their power. So it's like 75 years after the colonial era. So this is the high time for mature leadership to change these policies and start thinking then that regional cooperation and integration is the best way for the development of the entire societies. Right? No longer this like Kashmir will belong to Pakistan, which will never materialize, and they know it perfectly well. But this is the source of power for the ISI, for the military establishment, and they are just responsible for shaping domestic foreign policy right
It's
now.
also a source for electoral politics. It's also a source for electoral politics.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So then we have a lot of these China's ambition, more and more. We in the West, we are very careful about China because this is a purely authoritarian regime. I don't know what's your approach, but what I think, if the government bans their own citizens from protesting against their policies, then this approach will be replicated in other states, in other countries. So, I mean, you should develop relations with China, but very carefully, and everything has to be discussed before it's introduced, right? I saw how China introduces their own policies in Pakistan, and that it also there are lots of problems and challenges, and this debt trap in Sri Lanka as well. So the debt trap, this is a real trap for the economy of the country, and that is also where this resilience of Nepal should be focused on. This should be the pillar, entering into relations, but discussing and somehow like shaping these relations and agreements so that they benefit the Nepali society as a whole. So then Afghanistan ruled by the Taliban. Afghanistan is a bit further from here, but still I would say it will backfire. This is just a matter of time. This radicalization, massive radicalization, deprivation of basic rights. So how the country can develop economically when you put women at home, when you just introduce very aggressive, harsh policies, and when you want to have some impact also on Pakistan, this Pakistani-Afghani border, which has never been recognized. And again, this is the heritage of colonial times, the so-called Durand Line, which divided Pashto people, and the conflict is there, and Pakistan is using this conflict to provide some strategic depth, whatever, in Afghanistan, and this has always been a problem in the region, not resolved. And I think the Taliban has also ambitions. They have ambitions to create their own policy, not to be just a client state of Pakistan. This is not what they want. So this has also, like the general, I think, radicalization in the region may also have impact on Nepal, although indirect, but more directly I would say from India. And in India, the next year, I think this is the election year, and I think it will be a very decisive year for India. Who will win the elections? It will have the impact on the entire region, of course. India is a powerful country, there is no doubt. India has ambitions, and even if there are some problems with democracy, India is a winner. I would say that India, from this entire dynamically changing order, India is an ultimate winner because India is accepted by the West. They turn a blind eye. Oh, there is Modi, human rights violations, problems, but you can balance China. Balancing China is the most important. And again, this is like a Western mistake that they always focus on one thing, like communist threat in Afghanistan. You send troops, like finance. No, you don't send. You finance this Mujahideen, and then you go because the problem is over for you, but not for the region. And now again, this China, only China focus, without doing a proper research and analysis on the entire region. So that's why I also think that India will be the winner. India has relations with Russia. They don't care. They just want to introduce their own independent policy. This is what they emphasize. And I think that what happens in India will have a tremendously huge impact on the region. So then we have, I think you know the secret, the Stockholm Institute, and you know the analysis, who buys weapons, India, China, who invests in this rivalry, India, China. This is, you can go down. So I have these reports showing the export, and again, this is what always, can you stop please? This is always what I say to my students. If you look at the exporter of major arms, what countries are there? You have United States, you have Russia, you have France, you have China, and then the United Kingdom on the 7th position. So all permanent members of the Security Council are selling most weapons. So are they really interested in solving the conflict? This is a powerful source of money for them, right? Unfortunately, right? I'm laughing, but this is a very unfortunate. And then India is diversifying its sources, as you can see. Russia still, but then France again, and more United States. So there is a shift from the by the United States from Pakistan, partially to India. But of course, Pakistan cannot just drop its relations with Pakistan, the United States with Pakistan. Okay, you can go, please. And then you go. And India is the first importer of weapons, right? You can go. Yeah, I'm going to finish. So then, agency and shelter in Nepal strategy. This is like a very powerful source for empirical study for me. How to define the interest of Nepal and how it changes. How to put it, because it's not only, to have this theory of small powers, but you have to adjust it to the regional problems and adopt it with a particular political, security-related and socio-economic focus. Otherwise, it's just worthless. There's research, writing thousands of theory books, it's for nothing, just for students to suffer. The geostrategic challenge is agency potential of Nepal in its interactions with China, India, and other players. This is this provides an inspiration to reconceptualize the perception of smaller states. Okay, then you can continue. Soon I will. And then we have in my presentation, I think you can go down. Please go down to this. And there are pillars like, okay, political, security related. So these organizations like SARC, although SARC is like a paper tiger, we were discussing it with my colleagues. It is potential, but again, due to the conflict, not so much can be materialized. And it has impact on the entire region. Then you have BIMSTEC, you have BBIN, which is also an interesting initiative. And I've read that although not much has been materialized or not enough, but the trade among these countries has improved between 2015 and 2019 significantly, although there is still a lot of potential. So then we have peacekeeping missions, that is also powerful, so Gorkha soldiers and bravery. This is also when people know something about Nepal, so after the mountains, this will be the second thought. Which is also I would like to emphasize the fact that Nepal has good connotations, contrary to some other countries where people enumerate problems. But in the case of Nepal, it's not like this. So then we have different initiatives aimed at supporting the free market economy. That could be part of the socio-economic activity of Nepal, protection of the distinctive identity again, efforts aimed at recognizing it by the international actors. So the soft power strategy, which is also important for smaller countries as well, bigger powers as well. So you can go. And then concluding remarks, I will finish so then we can have a discussion. So then, in my opinion, what I think, that there are these certain pillars of Nepal's small power strategy of the agency. So agency and shelter, optimization of the so-called hedging, there are different names of this balancing strategy to maximize opportunities, because rising China gives opportunities, for sure. That is a fact. And India's dynamically evolving role. India's economy is developing. India's position is improving in the world. Hopefully it will stay the largest democracy in the world. So India is like a hope in the entire region as well. Not only problems, but also the chance that India will somehow have a positive impact on the region. So adjustment and active participation in shaping the new security environment. The second thing is justice and quality education. Quality education is the most important element. If you educate people in these belligerent narratives, then you create another generation of people who would hate each other. And this is happening in India and Pakistan, where the textbooks are manipulated. So what should these people think? They don't have background in the family, so not everybody is educated enough to teach them the real history, quality history. So they just blindly believe what is written in the textbooks. And then they repeat it, the same, without thinking. And this kind of education is not education, because it's just forcing people to repeat what they've read without any questioning. So this is not education. The quality education is to provide people with skills, with the ability to think, to consider, to ask questions as well. And dealing with domestic problems, this transitional justice is always everywhere in post-conflict societies when you have this transitional justice, how to deal with the victims of the conflict, how to provide justice. This is a challenge. And I know it's been discussed also, different bills that are supposed to be introduced to just somehow address this issue properly, like in accordance with the international law and the Nepali constitution. So these elements of social economic development and then education enables people to stay in Nepal. I know that many people leave to Malaysia, to the Arab countries of the Persian Gulf, to India, of course, and to the West. So they should stay. Educated people should be able to find a job and to be educated here to support the economic development. Then resilience, independent, profit-oriented strategy with multinational that serves the interest of the Nepali society as a whole, inclusive, which has been repeated here, the inclusion, democracy, but I know, I can understand it's very, very challenging to address the problems of all marginalized communities. Then the soft power, as I already mentioned, promotion of multilateralism, inclusion, international cooperation, reconciliation, resolution of conflict. So Nepali experts could come up with certain ideas how to resolve the conflict, the border conflict. There are so many different tiny, larger conflicts. So then this could also be a good contribution. And connectivity. And this has been repeated by the Chinese, but also earlier by Xi Jinping and landlocked. It's a catchphrase. It's nice, yeah. You know, in political science, we also use these nice catchphrases that from landlocked to land-linked country. It's nice to write it, but especially in the north, it's very challenging topography. So there is a need for investments and development of connectivity. So connectivity is another important pillar for the future for Nepal, I think. So I would finish, and I would be so happy to listen to what you think and what are your ideas, so then I can also learn from you. Thank you so much.
If I can, I will have some questions.
Professor Agnieszka, you have given a very good presentation. It was very comprehensive. It was more analytical and more informative. Yeah. You talked on so many areas. It was very comprehensive too, so it was very inclusive as well. You talked from enhancing quality educations to leadership role, how they should come up with proper strategies and policies to enrich the citizens and the nations in terms of national security, be it in terms of national interest, right? And you also talked on small states and the small powers and their position of vulnerability, and how those difficulties, constraints, and how those vulnerabilities of small power and small nations can be changed into possibilities, potentialities, and the strength. That was the major point I have focused on your presentations. So, without taking much of your time,
I'm
now
here.
I open the floor,
Yeah.
and with your specific questions, with your short introductions and the background, and I will probably prefer one question from one participant, right?
Or comments,
Right.
or comments also.
Okay.
Yes, very
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, let me speak, and I have to move also, I'm
Okay.
late.
Okay.
Like when you talk about, educated people should stay, like I have been, I don't know, I should use which hat here today. I was a journalist. After I graduated from Bangladesh, I joined the newsroom called Republica, English newsroom. And then I was so much dedicated that one day I would be the editor. There's no woman editor in mainstream media till now. But then what happened? Earthquake took place. Me and my husband, we work in the same newsroom. We didn't used to get salary for 6 months. I had a daughter.
Yeah.
But when I was pregnant, I survived the newsroom because I was given work from home back then, 2015, not even COVID. But then after I had my daughter, I had to pay for her education. So who's going to leave the newsroom?
So everybody has to pay for the education.
Yeah,
There is no
it's
state.
very expensive, very,
Okay.
very expensive.
Okay.
Private schools, the Montessori schools.
And the quality.
And the quality is always, Montessori schools, like private schools are far more better than the government ones.
And are there any state schools? State owned?
We have,
For
we
free?
have, we
But
do
the
have.
quality is not as
Quality,
good.
Now
And-
there are some practices now recently
I
introduced.
think I should finish
Yeah, it's
first.
been 2 years now. So
Let me
I just
finish
want
this.
to add,
Please, one
you
by
know,
one, Mati.
not all community schools are bad. That's my point.
Maybe
Okay.
after that. So then, I was telling my story, and then I have to leave the newsroom by force, not by choice.
But why?
But because my husband was not willing to leave, he was enjoying his photojournalism profession, but then financial crisis. So last month in November in Oslo, during the Safety of Journalists conference, I go to Oslo everywhere at Oslo Met. I presented a paper, We Feed News, Who Feed Us? And I think the title is enough. So I didn't survive. Then I went to Swiss embassy after the earthquake. I worked in the embassy, and then there I was not satisfied. I used to get lots of money, but then my dream was not that. So I wanted to have a PhD. Then I switched to China in 2018. And when I used the research hat, and my supervisor, he was very friendly, Canadian Chinese, who suggested me, I went there to do a study on gender and media. But then he suggested, are you really wanted to be a gender expert? I said, no. So you change your proposal. We used to talk every hour, every day, 1 hour every day. And he said, you want to return back to Nepal like you did in the past after studying from Oslo Met. So where do you want to see after 3 years when you finish your PhD? I said, I'll be maybe working in the embassy again because they pay very huge amount. And he said, I don't think you'll be satisfied
Sorry, will you
again.
try to
So,
be more specific?
Like I said,
Yes.
5 minutes, so
Okay.
I think I should get 5 minutes. It's just 2 minutes. So then I said, okay, I did IT and tourism reporting.
No, I didn't
and
say 5
studied-
minutes. Only 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll
Oh,
finish.
yes.
I don't know if she's willing to listen, I don't know. So then I did my PhD in ICT, contribution of ICT in socio-economic development of Nepal.
But here, you managed to
no,
do it
China.
in
China,
China.
but my field of study was Nepal. So I graduated 2 years back, and it was during COVID I came here. And when I finished my PhD, I couldn't get the job. Everywhere I was, PhD
why
is
is
an
it so
overqualified
difficult?
term.
Uh-huh.
You can't get job. Like the colleagues I used to work in the embassy, they are all team leaders in different projects, different embassies. So I was overqualified, totally overqualified. Still now I'm jobless.
So this
Still
is the
now I'm
reason why
jobless.
many people.
So when you
I
say
mean,
like,
one of the reasons
yeah.
why people leave.
Exactly.
They have
When you
to
say like
search
educated
when-
people like
yeah,
us
yeah.
should stay
Yeah.
back in Nepal, I think it's easier said than done.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's really difficult to stay back here, and I feel like I should do postdoc again and go to Europe or States.
And
So what is your
I've read
solutions?
that in comparison to the census of 2011 and 2021, there is this comparison that more women leave now,
Exactly.
more than
the
10 years
men,
back.
the educated women, they
And
leave.
especially educated, because
Educated
men,
women.
some of them go to physical jobs.
They go to the
Women,
golf
if they leave,
courses.
mostly not to
Exactly.
perform physical
So
jobs.
what's your suggestion,
educated.
feedback? you
Yeah,
know?
certain policies have to be introduced just to.
And I work
enable
for the government
people.
of Nepal advertising board to make policy. As a policy expert, but then it's paid like only the food allowance or travel allowance as a policy expert. We don't get anything. They hire us as external expert, but then that does not feed my stomach.
Yeah.
So I have to
It's
think
really
of going
challenging.
abroad. So what is the solution? Like we are here think tanks, educated people, and even the government people. So what is the solution for small states is my question.
So the small states should ask the governments to act accordingly, and this is why you have think tanks to, somehow debate on it and I don't know, to write to the government. This is what you should do this and do that, and I think some recommendations are
In
needed.
this
But
room,
there is
yes.
a lot of people who work like in journalism, and there are lots of interesting. I mean, I read of course the English newspapers, and I can see and say that the articles written there are very professional, like about China, about all these geostrategic issues. So I think there is some hope, like that you can find a job if you're so well
It's not-
qualified.
Also, then I also
I think
link
you
to
got
the
some
question,
of the
question
suggestions,
about
from the
digital
presenter,
thing.
yeah?
When it's online, how do you link that to that?
And I think the earthquake had a dramatic effect on especially when the borders. I think China closed, but India also closed the borders, and that was a nightmare here. I think in hospitals where there was no antibiotics, no oxygen therapy, nothing. So this is what I've read, and I think this is one of the reasons when Nepal turned a bit towards China, or just to show India, you're not the only one here. We can just do our own policy. We can be resilient. Yeah.
Okay. Is that okay now?
Yeah.
Now, can I invite other participants to come up with some queries, suggestions, or concerns? Okay. Your
So-
name and affiliation, please.
So, I'm Saurav. I'm researcher in IR. Thank you, Professor, for your presentation. So, talking about Nepal's small power strategy, let's take an example in Europe in current time. Finland and Sweden, they applied for NATO membership, thinking that they will be safe in the entire terror of war. Because one for all, NATO, Article 5 is one for all. And Finland already entered into NATO. Sweden is on the process due to their own political crisis. They're in Sweden. About one of the politicians burning Quran in Sweden. So the proposal is delayed by Turkey. So, and in Eastern and Western Europe also, there's always a fear of like either going to Russia or either coming to West or European Union. You can see this example.
Yeah, especially right now when there is this aggression of Russia,
Yeah.
and there are sanctions that are imposed. I mean, Russia has violated international law by invading a sovereign country. So Nepal, as a smaller state, can also imagine the situation when some other powerful country invades, and then Nepal would like international community to support against the invasion of the attacker. I mean, Putin is today's Hitler. He's attacking countries. So if you are not supporting the international law and you are not condemning the aggression, then you are a country that supports the one who violates this.
But in case of Nepal, so we protest against Russia's Russia against war in Ukraine in the United Nations, and we talk about in Nepal. There's a protest in Nepal. It's let's say intellectual protest that we should be non-aligned. We shouldn't be talking to any countries actually. So we should be non-aligned. So
Yeah.
small power strategy,
Yeah.
or in this context, in current context, we are now forced to align.
Yeah, sure.
To some-
Being non-aligned is always better than supporting the attacker, for sure.
Yeah. But being non-aligned is getting a big problem in Nepal because we are forced to move to either China or to India, and historically we are more close to India, geographically more close to India, and we are supposed to, by force, we need to go to India. And China is emerging power.
I think 71% of Nepal's export goes to India. This is like the first partner, and China is the 13th right now. It's 0.4% of Nepali export goes to China.
So,
the difference is
So 90% of our policies that is always directed to India. So we cannot balance India and China at the same pace in Nepal.
Yeah, for sure.
It's
There is
a
no,
challenge.
you cannot
So,
balance like fully.
it's hard to develop idle small power strategy policy in Nepal.
Yeah.
It's idle policy. There's no idle policy. There's no one line policy. So either you need to get economically empowered, economically stable, to have your voice in international forum.
Yeah.
So going through in the United Nations organizations, like in LDC countries or any regional forum, it's highly bureaucratic. So negotiation power in compared to European Union and Nepal is very different. So if you go with SAARC or if you go with like LDC countries in UN, so negotiation power European Union is much more powerful because they are donor to certain issues in the world.
Yeah.
And for us, it's different. So you
Yeah,
talked
for
about
sure.
like a multilateral strategy.
It has to be multilateral. You can't just focus on
Yeah,
India
yeah, so-
because it
so-
adversely affects Nepal's
If you
interests.
see, like, if you observe, like, past 20 years, 30 years, so our national interest in international forum or in a regional forum, so we have not been able to secure our national interest due to our own weaknesses.
I
So-
think the investment in infrastructure, electrification, and Nepal is a state that connects the countries without being engaged in conflicts and rivalries.
So
That would be
Yeah,
the
you
idea.
talked about like from landlocked to landlicked, and
Yeah,
we are planning to have railway from China. From
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
And-
I wonder if this
Yeah.
will be materialized because I think that there is this BRI.
Yeah.
Nepal is a part since 2017, but correct me if I'm wrong. Not a single project within BRI has been materialized,
So,
right?
from the Chinese perspective, the Karen Kathmandu project, from a Chinese professor perspective, the Karen Kathmandu railway project is very risky, very economically unprofitable.
Yeah.
So if you invest in a unreturning investment, China is a business country, so it will be usually strategic project. So they want to get something out of that. And our Prime Minister is visiting India soon,
Yeah.
the third week of April.
Yeah.
The third week of April, and he's planning to have like Kathmandu Rockshore, the Indian border railway line.
Yeah, the border issue is,
Yeah. So the
I think it
connectivity-
deserves a separate research because
Yeah.
in every part of this Nepal border in India and China there are challenges. Like I've heard that China is reluctant to open these border, the Tatopani, am I right? Because of the, I think,
Geographically difficult.
yeah, it's challenging.
Next thing is that
And also Tibetan refugees.
Yeah, yeah.
So Tibet is, this
So
is the
both
pillar
countries-
of
both
China's
countries-
strategy.
both countries are
Control,
responsible.
again, control what is happening in Nepal, right? So then there is no like pro-Tibetan protests like in 2008, I think. So then there's this like trying to influence. So then there is the question, the superpowers, what sort of strategy do they use? Is this like forcing Nepal, like coercive or persuasive? Persuade you to, this is good for you, this you should engage, we're treating you like a partner country, like really a partner, or we are just imposing. So when I'm coming back to this Lithuania case, when Lithuania introduced, withdrew from this 17+1 bloc, China immediately imposed sanctions on Lithuania. So then they suspended exchange and cooperation. They banned imports of goods which contained Lithuanian parts. It disrupted even the supply chain. So they were ready to punish the country because it did not behave as they wanted. So this is always you should think.
so
This is just the contradict activity of soft power diplomacy. Right?
Exactly.
Right?
so interesting thing is that
It also
Yeah, yeah.
works for the case of
Have you
USA.
completed?
or-
Just make it very
Just-
short and specific.
so my last comment, so my last observation.
Last sentence, okay?
Or two,
So-
maybe maximum two.
So you talked about like coercive and supportive strategy. Currently, so most of the hydro projects that Chinese is funding, or it has a Chinese contractor, India is not supplying explosive to the construction project. And second is that India is also saying that we won't buy electricity that is produced by China or with Chinese investment or with Chinese contractor.
Yeah, exactly.
So they are playing in that way. And so if you produce electricity with Chinese support or Chinese fund, we won't buy. And next thing that our two airports, Pokhara Airport,
And
international and Bhairava International.
no international flights there.
Yeah,
not
because
so much.
Pokhara Airport is built by Chinese Exim Bank
Yeah, I
fund
know, I know.
loan, and Bhairava
Could you
is
please
built by
conclude it?
So you think that
Yeah.
India will not take flights from this airport?
yeah.
Oh my gosh! Now this is very
It's a pure geopolitical power game.
In the case of
And
hydropower.
this is like children.
Yeah,
This is like children's behavior, right? I will not take because the Chinese build this airport.
So yeah.
Yeah, and
Yes,
this is-
yes.
And what is the
Okay.
solution?
Exactly, we should be solution.
I
Research
agree,
and
yes.
also
Yeah.
solution
One
oriented.
small question.
Not blaming each
Could you
other.
please explain again the terms agency and shelter?
Yeah. The agency is like the active participation in changing this entire security system through multiple different policies. So agency is the being active, and shelter is like being forced to cooperate with the neighbors because Nepal has to. So I'm somehow searching for the shelter and at the same time introducing their own policy. So this is like a balance.
Yes.
Shelter and agency.
Yes, shelter
So not
and
only
agency.
you're just adjusting to what the big countries say, but you also have your agency, your policy, and you can use this weakness, this vulnerability, and with a smart policy transform it into some strength. I think. Although there are challenges, if like so, then expose it. If India says we will not take, so it has to be exposed at the international level, just to show that this is
So-
not right.
Right.
If there is infrastructure, we should cooperate. Not say
So
like we
diplomacy is-
tried, we will
yeah.
not use because Chinese.
Everyone
This
knows.
is your operational definitions
Yeah.
with regard to your presentation.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I was also supposed to ask what agency and the said
Yeah, yeah,
they
yeah,
do
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Thank you, ma'am. That's
That's it. Ask.
After you.
Wale.
I'm a retired general from the Nepal Army, retired about 12 years ago. I've got few points that I would like to elaborate and then seek your advice. I believe on the theory that Aristotle said a long time ago that bigger fish will always eat smaller fish. So I think the regional hegemony in our part of the world will never subside.
Sure.
There is a battle between China and India to ensure that Nepal is under their claws or whatsoever, in whichever fashion. That's one. The second point that I would like to make is, instead of calling landlocked, I think we are land linked.
Yeah, this is
If we could capitalize that land linkness by communications, maybe it's a positive way of enhancing our country's
yeah, yeah.
development. And the third thing is, definitely it was a very good proposal by late Majesty King Birendra when he wanted Nepal to be declared a zone of peace area, like Switzerland, which the Indians denied. So that is one bad luck to us. Probably if we were a land of neutrality, probably both the country would invest more and there would be things that would work better for both the countries as well. I have that sensitive feeling, unfortunately. And the last, not the least, is non-alignment. We were in that Panchashil thing. It was a great adventurous move. Our late King Mahendra was there in Jakarta, etc. places, and then later on, the superpower said, how can small countries be neutral? Because you have to link yourself. You have to align. Because whatever you say, when superpower does not agree, we can easily outwit you.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that alignment has to happen. That's how it feels, I believe. So now, in the game of all these happenings and the current scenario with Ukraine and Russia, a country like Nepal and its viability, its feasibility, and its way approach, I think this is what we got to think now. I think this is our food for thought.
Yeah.
How should we approach ourselves? In which manners should we go? I think that is the real term for small states like us to ponder and then to move about. The government must be advised in that manner so that we can safeguard ourselves any unforeseen eventualities.
Yeah, yeah.
That's my
Absolutely.
observation.
Yes?
Yeah.
Do you have to respond this query or if you find
No,
this?
I fully agree. I share your
Yes.
thoughts.
Great.
I think that
What
was
can I
just a
add?
concern
Yeah, yeah.
in a
I
suggestive
agree with
way.
you. But I
Right.
think this is like geostrategically, this is the time. Right? This is a good time to just find your
Yes.
space, your place, and to enhance your capabilities in these difficult times, of course.
Yeah, so far we know international politics, international relation, it has always been a study of influence and influential.
Yeah.
Our JARSAP has analyzed it that way, that the big fish always eat the small
Or
fish, right?
tries to.
This
eat,
is this is
tries.
just how the influence and influential. This is the sphere of influence, right?
But Nepal
No.
is not the small fish, I think, not that much. Not the tiny.
It's not the
That's
small
middle.
fish.
It's a
neither-
middle.
Yes, neither is the small
Not
fish.
easy to swallow.
Nor a
Not so
yam,
much.
a yam between two borders.
I mean, if the
that
British
has
did
been
not have not
quite
managed-
an old mindset. We have to come up from that mindset that we are not a small state.
Yeah, yeah.
Smallness
exactly.
is always a relative form.
Exactly.
There are so many smaller nations than Nepal.
Of course.
Even we see how small nations, they are having quite good impact on world economy and politics because of their strategic locations and the resource.
Yeah.
In terms of Nepal, we do have good qualities. So no more we are smaller and no more we are weak, right?
If you perceive yourself as a
Yes.
small country, then everybody will just.
This is just our weak
small as well.
psychology and the
Yeah,
mentality,
yeah,
so
it's all
that we
about
have to
definition
come up
and-
from that weak mentality and the psychology. Right?
And
Right?
like self-projection
Yes.
to the
Now,
world.
Matrika.
Yeah, namaskar everybody. Sorry for being very, very late. I was the earliest invitee. former Daya invited me. Maybe I was on the top. And thank you for your wonderful presentation, Professor Bernard. This is very timely discussion
I fully agree.
and very innovative idea like the term. We do not have that kind of familiarization with agency and shelter strategy. These all are very inquisitive, keep us intact in exploring on IR, in IR, right? Actually, I do not have that very straightforward query, but there are few, confusing points, like in terms of Nepalese international relation and diplomacy, or the practices that we have been doing in Nepal. There are few theoretical biases, it's actually our universities and in our epistemological, the groups are there. They have been heavily influenced by the Western intellectual community, the university departments, and we also have like Eastern way of thinking. We have Eastern mandala theory or Saptanga theory, or we frequently discuss about that, but they have not been practical so far.
Yeah.
So it would be wonderful if you write or talk or think about Nepal and Nepalese foreign policy, or the foreign policy of this part of the world. Try to incorporate. It's my humble request.
Yeah, that's why I came here to buy some book and the research.
Yes, genuine practices that we have so many volumes. It's in Sanskrit now, translated into English also. And you'll have plenty of avenues.
I will ask you for the names.
Yeah.
I will share
I will
with
send
me.
you
I
the
will be
list
very
of the
grateful.
books. Yeah.
Of course,
I have
because
some soft copies. I will
fully
send
agree.
you.
Yeah.
Email
In
or
my
anything.
chapter, I'm using some Eastern researchers as well of the publications, but of course I do agree it should not be only based like international relations are so Western oriented. Whatever you write, it's mostly Western. So
And
when
it's
you write
also-
about India, you should also research and find what Indian academics or researchers or experts write. This is also what I do. If you look at my 3 books published in Routledge, you will find lots of South Asian names.
Great.
But from Nepal, I need more for sure.
And again, thank you for the wonderful beginning. This initiation is wonderful, and I congratulate you for
Thank you so much.
delivering this wonderful presentation and helping us understand more about Nepal.
And you help me. I'm paying for helping you.
Thanks.
My name is Purna Sibal. Actually, I did my PhD on national security. First of all, we thank you very much for your very excellent presentation. We learned a lot, because coming from Poland and as a professor, you're talking about Nepal, and it's very good, that when you listen.
And this is the agency of Nepal that we should also discuss Nepal
The
and
perspective of other countries, I think, is better.
challenges
This
in
is
Europe.
very interesting, because we look very stereotyped, on our situations, but people from external outside world, they have a typical way of looking at things. So the presentation is very good. Nepal is in a very difficult situation than ever before, because when there was a Second World War, British Empire was right here, and we are fighting for British Empire.
Yeah.
Now Third World War is approaching, unfortunately, or some agree or some do not, but the conflict will happen, on South China Sea, on Ladakh, or now happening in Ukraine. But world is already involved in war, whether it's a world war or not. But we are already involved in it, directly or indirectly. So in that situation, since our neighbors are, politically they have contradicting ideologies, and both are very rising power, global rising, both are, one is second power now, and India is also, competing to be third power. So when you have, two big powers on your sides, and you are politically so unstable, like we are now, and they are also contributing to, increase political instability here.
Yeah, sure.
When you have
sure.
political
Sure,
instability,
they have their own interests.
you have got some kind of control, to shape
yeah.
the domestic politics here. So that is they are doing, under their very carefully planned strategy. That is what I feel. So, since you have thoroughly studied on other smaller powers, like now Mongolia is in a better situation than now, because Mongolia's both neighbors are they are allies now, but our neighbors are not allies. But probably they will have war anytime soon or in coming years. So we are in a very typical difficult situation. Like Poland is also in a difficult situation now. So as a politically unstable, so you have given a lot of suggestions. Many of the suggestions are very good, but the land leak concept, this is just a theoretical concept, because Indian political policy makers have already, many a times they have underlined that we will not trade with China through Nepal, because we are already connected through land. They have their own transit points, with Tibet, with mainland China. So and they have through sea also, a lot of business going on with China. So land link means just connecting doesn't mean land link. You have to have trade between these three countries, through Nepal. Then it is truly a land linked, which is not happening. This is not happening, and because of their enmity among themselves, and it is not likely to happen in foreseeable future.
So Nepal is like paying the price for this rivalry.
Yeah, because our dependency has increased, by many fold than ever before. Now we are about, as you have already
Sorry,
stated.
Joshua, will you please make it short?
Okay, are there any more suggestions? Countries like in such a difficult, geopolitical scenario, are there, based on your studies with other smaller countries, what are the better suggestions for Nepal, to come out of this?
Maybe being resilient and introducing this strategy, this diplomacy of peace-oriented, neutral country, and repeating it endlessly. And if India says we don't want, so you can emphasize Nepal is a sovereign country, it has the right to introduce their own policies. So whatever is happening like on Nepali territory, it's just neutral. And if you want to include or invest or engage in any project, that you have to somehow accept it. That if you are in rivalry with China, then do it beyond or behind. Do not include a sovereign country in your strategies. I know it's difficult because India is a powerful country, but I think this is like this resilient diplomacy, repeating it endlessly. This may somehow have some impact or success in the upcoming decades, because it won't change. The power rivalry here in the region will not change. It will be there. India is getting stronger, China is getting stronger, and since 2020 there has been like an open conflict again at the border between China and India, and this may escalate. There is always a risk. So I do agree, it's a challenging. There are no like. I cannot just say in 2 or 10 points, this is the solution, right? It's always very challenging for such a country as Nepal to introduce successful policies.
We already had a plan of like more trans-Himalayan multi-dimensional connectivity network with India, China, and Nepal. But we are dealing with bilateral either with India or either with China. So we are not trying to agree. But that's the.
I think this is
that's
the
the
biggest
competition.
challenge,
Yeah.
to successfully introduce the policy of like a peace-oriented, neutral country. And whenever China and India are in a rivalry, it does not include Nepali territory, or should not. This is the only option. I know it's very difficult to introduce, but I think that should be part of the so-called Brazilian diplomacy. At least this is what can be done.
Okay. Dear prominent participants, the problem is that I'm also being controlled by super chair, Dr. Jaiswal from NIC. So I have to look forward with the time. We were supposed to end the session by 4:30, and we are already running out of time. I can entertain only one question from the floor. Okay, that will be the last one. Then again we can have some discussions if we are provided with tea. Okay.
My name is Sampurna Basnet. I'm a public policy student. My question is in relevance with this change or transition from a bipolar state governance to a multipolar power-centric in the entire international system. So my question is, how do you see BRICS future in reference to its status with US dominance, in reference to the currency status. So because China and India are, in context of the entire debate, the change in currency will also affect the international relations, because our all international relations is dependent not based on value but on interests. Therefore,
I think that every empire falls sooner or later. Maybe it will not happen within the next few years, but there is a change. It's perceptible, and within the next 10, 20 years, we will have this is the 21st century is the century of Asia. Everybody is repeating it and parroting this narrative, and I think this will have an impact on the power of dollar. I mean, not within few years, because still, American economy is the most powerful in the world. They're selling their weapons, and they are engaged in different regions globally. So it will be like a gradual process, very slow process, but within the next 10, 20 years. I mean, in 20 years, if we look at what will be the situation there, I think we will be surprised to see how it will change. So for sure, the BRICS is, this is like a political sort of union, but there are also lots of problems. I mean, Russia, India, it's also challenging, because India doesn't want to just be focused on Russia. Russia's future is unpredictable. We don't know who will be in power. We don't know how the sanctions will impact Russia. So Russia is rather an unpredictable partner. The weapons from Russia are outdated, so it's better to invest in cooperation with the West. So I think, although India wants to emphasize that they are not a colonial country, we will not do what the West wants from us, but they will be focused on rather cooperation with the West than because there is China, there is this authoritarian China here in the neighborhood. So I think India will be more tilted towards the West. But at the same time, there are different initiatives like Saudi Arabia, Iran. So then it seems, at least we can think or suspect, that this American power is diminishing. And it will all depend on the results of the elections. When Trump wins or the Republicans win in the United States, it will be a problem for Americans and
There's
for their
just one
strategy,
line I
for
want
sure.
to say, when it comes to digital security, we don't have to use Signal. So we can use phone, call every time. When I went to Europe, people were using Signal because it's secure, but Nepal is so safe that we don't have to at least use Signal,
Yeah.
So I'm proud to be having stayed in Nepal and can call to everyone anytime we want.
Yeah, I think this foreign perspective is sometimes or quite often more positive than the perspective from here sometimes. That people have this tendency to minimize their impact, whereas it's not. Researchers, everybody's interested in the situation and more focusing on these smaller countries. And having some hope that this democratic resilience will prevail here in this difficult neighborhood, which is again a tremendous challenge.
Yeah.
So resilience is the key, and my heart is with Nepal. I keep my fingers crossed that we will not be somehow dominated by either India or China, or this impact on undemocratic forces, because that would be destructive, I think. Again, turning into some conflict and some polarization, aggression, that would be destructive for Nepal. More than it is for India, although India also suffers, I think, internationally as well.
Yes.
The perception of India has changed. Some people emphasize the problems there. Again, but hopefully, I believe in Indian democracy as well, although it's challenging.
Okay, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you
Your
so
heart
much.
is with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
That means a lot to us, right? Wonderful queries from the floor and your wonderful response. That has made the session very lively and interactive.
Thank
right?
you so much.
So, with regard, the main idea focused on the strategy of Nepal in dynamically evolving security landscapes, right? So, I would be adding some more points as supplement. So, I should rather say that geography is hardly amenable to change. It hardly changes. It doesn't mean it doesn't change, but it is hard to change. And in the same way, history it can neither be reinvented nor it can be borrowed. So this is the reality we have to live on and we are living in. So we always adhere to the principle of non-alignment foreign policy that is based on sovereign equality, social justice, right to self-determination, mutual respect for each other and understanding. So in that way, foreign policy hardly changes in its substance with regard to its basic principle, right? But what it changes really is the strategies, the approaches and the modalities to deal with the changing realities in foreign policy. That is quite important part, right? The substance of foreign policy hardly changes, but the approach modalities, they are ever-changing part of foreign policy. So we can take them all as the tools of foreign policy so that foreign policy can be fitted into external and internal environment, right? I have already talked with our old mindset that we have to come out from that phenomena. So we know we are living in between two great powers, the superpowers, having already supersonic structures. For that, what we need to do, what are the strategies of Nepal in dynamically evolving security landscapes? Number one, we have to find a right policy for our special strategy, right? Find the right policy, find the right special policy, find the right strategy for our special strategy that suits to our geographic situation and the landscapes. Number two, we have to stay out from power competitions without being influenced by either of the big powers. We have our one national interest, we have our national identity, we have territorial integrity, and this is the responsibility of Nepal and Nepali people. How do we protect our national interest and the sovereignty and the security? The third one, it is necessary for Nepali and Nepal to understand that the world is quite different now, what it used to be in the past. So we have to keep up with the changing realities, especially the geopolitical realities of the global power structures. So we have to be prepared ourselves, that is quite important part, to deal with enormity of changes without compromising our national interest and then national security, right? So that it should be promoting national interest and security on one side, and on the other, it promotes the people's sentiment of the 21st century that is based on what? Equality, social justice, right to self-determination, human security, human dignity, right? And the mutual benefit and the shared benefit for each other. For that, what we need to do is you have also talked on diplomacy, right? How we can have good diplomatic and management and the system on diplomacy. We have to enhance diplomatic capability. That is quite important part in the present context of Nepal's foreign policy and the diplomatic arena. We have to enhance a very effective diplomatic and capability, right? That of course enhances our state capability. Once our state capability is enhanced, then we can automatically enhance our state effectiveness. Once the state effectiveness is enhanced, then state legitimacy can be made stable, effective, and very strong, right? Then only we can maintain our internal security, we can come out from domestic mess and disorders, right? And for all those, what is the most important part we do need in the present context is political will and the political commitment coming from the political leadership. So they have to come up with proper strategies, they have to come up with proper policies, right? To promote national security and the interest and they should be knowing which policies and the strategies enrich and enlighten the citizen and the nation, right? Well, only then these may be the strategies for Nepal to coming up dynamically, in dynamically evolving security landscapes in the present context of regional and global politics. Right? With these few words, I conclude the session. Thank you once again, Professor Agnieszka, the director, Ms. Dr. Jaiswal, and all the prominent participants. I'm sorry, because of time constraints, I could not give enough time. And because of time constraints itself, I could not entertain the queries from all the participants. Thank you.
Thank you so much.